Bonjour à tout le monde. Je m'appelle Carl Bouchard. Je suis commissaire au service en français de l'Ontario par Interim. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carl Bouchard. I am Ontario's Interim French Language Services Commissioner. It is a pleasure for me to be here today. Et je vais vous parler dans les deux langues aujourd'hui, mais sentez-vous à l'aise d'intervenir dans la langue de votre choix et j'offrirai mes services d'interprétation sommaire pour que l'ensemble des gens avec nous puissent participer pleinement à la session. I'll be speaking to you in both languages today, but please feel free to speak in the language of your choice and I'll provide my services to provide you with a summary in both languages so you can fully participate in this panel today. Je suis heureux d'être ici avec vous et d'entendre les points de vue de nos panélistes et vous tous dans l'auditoire, évidemment, sur vos stratégies visant à profiter de l'avantage commercial de la francophonie. I want to thank the Toronto Global Forum and the Ministerial Council on the Canadian Francophonie for this invitation. It is crucial for organizations such as yours to include sessions on the opportunities the French language offers in Canada and in Ontario for Canadians and whoever wants to do business here. I hope this best practice remains part of your programming in the future. Je tiens à remercier le Toronto Global Forum et la conférence ministérielle sur la francophonie canadienne pour cette invitation. C'est crucial pour des organisations comme la vôtre d'inclure des sessions sur les opportunités qu'offre la langue française au Canada et en Ontario pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes et pour tous ceux et celles qui veulent faire affaire au pays. J'espère que cette pratique exemplaire continuera de faire partie de votre programmation pour l'avenir. As we heard, French is one of the languages with the highest growth projection in the world. French-speaking population expected to reach 700 million speakers by mid-century. And from Africa to Vietnam, and from Canada to France, 20% of the world's trade involves Francophone countries. So there's a lot of opportunities. In 2021, more than 8.3 million people, or almost a quarter of the population in Canada, were or had ever been a landed immigrant or permanent resident. In Ontario, there are over 650,000 Francophones from all over the world. The overall Francophone population in Ontario grew of 30,000 people in 5 years. French is the official language of roughly 21 of the 54 African countries where a lot of our immigrants come from. Selon la Fédération des gens d'affaires de l'Ontario, seulement ici dans la province, il y a plus de 30 000 entreprises francophones. According to the Fédération des gens d'affaires de l'Ontario, there are over 30,000 francophone businesses in Ontario alone. La francophonie représente de grandes opportunités et si vous offrez des services en français, or if you want to offer services in French, there are major opportunities to grow. As Interim French Language Services Commissioner, I lead the French Language Services Unit of the Ombudsman's Office, and I work with the Ombudsman Paul Dubé and our teams to monitor the compliance under the French Language Services Act of government. This means resolving issues raised by the public who complain to us when they can't access services in French, and we make recommendations to improve those services. We oversee thousands of organizations, including 9 post-secondary institutions, 2 colleges, 7 universities that produce thousands of market-ready French-speaking professionals each year. According to the Fédération des gens d'affaires de l'Ontario, the Francophone and bilingual workforce contribute to $80 billion to Ontario's gross domestic product, representing 12% of the province's GDP. Now, let's see how you can take advantage of those opportunities. The reflection today will revolve around 2 questions. La réflexion d'aujourd'hui va s'articuler autour de 2 questions. How can Canadian companies leverage the economic network of Canadian Francophonie to develop more business partnership abroad? Comment les entreprises canadiennes peuvent-elles tirer parti du réseau économique de la francophonie canadienne pour développer davantage de partenariats commerciaux à l'étranger? How can we take advantage of the growth of the international francophone space to make it a key driver of economic growth for Canada? Comment tirer parti de la croissance de l'espace francophone international pour en faire un moteur de croissance économique au Canada? I would like to introduce you to your panel for today. Je vous présente vos panélistes pour aujourd'hui. Gaëtan Thomas, Chair, président de l'Alliance de la francophonie économique canadienne. Charles Milliard, président et chef de la direction, President and CEO of Fédération des chambres du commerce du Québec. Catherine Tadros, chef, Chief Representative, Bureau du Québec à Toronto. Plante, président et chef de la direction, President CEO of RDÉE Canada. J'invite le public, évidemment, à intervenir dans la langue de votre choix. You can address in the language of your choice. Je vais maintenant inviter chaque panéliste à se présenter et présenter, évidemment, leur organisme pour bien contextualiser la discussion d'aujourd'hui, en commençant par Gaëtan.
Bonjour tout le monde. It's a pleasure for me to be here in Toronto and be part of a panel where we're promoting the economic francophonie and the businesses that are all across Canada. I'm here as the President CEO of the Conseil économique of New Brunswick, but I'm also been nominated as the first chair of the Alliance de la Francophonie économique canadienne with 4 founding members, Ontario, la FGA, Alberta, le CDEA, le Québec, la FCCQ, et le Nouveau-Brunswick, and New Brunswick with the Conseil économique du Nouveau-Brunswick. We're the 4 founding members. We are the 4 provinces where there are more businesses that are actually done in French and also in both languages. And our association operates completely in French, but we also have unilingual members who really decided that there's advantages that we'll be talking about today. So I'll answer the questions later. La francophonie à Toronto est vivante. It's been 100+ times I came to Toronto. In the last 2 days, I met a lot of Ontarians that speak French. And that was really, really music to my ears, that they were business people and it's live and healthy in Toronto. So congratulations.
Merci beaucoup. Charles?
Merci, Carl. Merci, Gaëtan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Milliard, CEO of the Fédération of Chambers of Commerce of Quebec, FCCQ. FCCQ has been around for 114 years now. So from a Canadian standpoint, that's pretty old. So since 1909. We're kind of like the OCC, like the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, but just a bit better. I don't know if my friend Rocco is here this morning, but jokes aside, the FCCQ regroups all of the Chambers of Commerce of Quebec, so there's 125 of them, and we're also the Chamber of Commerce of Quebec with 1,200 corporate members. Our main focus is the regional economic development of Quebec, so we have strong Chambers of Commerce in Quebec like Montreal, Quebec City, Trois-Rivières, Sherbrooke, but we also have regions that needs some lights from an economic perspective. So we're there to shed some lights on those. And we've been pretty active in the Canadian Francophonie business, especially with my friend Gaëtan with the Alliance de la Francophonie canadienne. And you explained a little bit what it is in English. Maybe I can say it in French. Donc, l'Alliance a été créée en janvier dernier pour s'assurer qu'on a un maximum de connexion entre les différents entrepreneurs canadiens-français sur l'ensemble du territoire. Alors, on a 4 membres fondateurs pour l'instant, mais l'objectif, c'est d'avoir une association économique francophone par province pour représenter l'Alliance. So I'm guessing we'll get back to that a bit later. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Catherine?
Merci, Carl. Bonjour tout le monde. Très content d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Very happy to be with you today. We were discussing among ourselves that it's strange for us to be speaking in English since we're all French speakers. But we were told that our goal today is really to reach out to Anglophone community. And so we're happy to do that. Donc, Catherine Tadros, chef de poste du Bureau du Québec à Toronto. I'm head of the Quebec office here in Toronto. For those that may be surprised that we have an office here in Toronto, let it be known that we've had an office for 50 years now. Quebec is a province that has over 35 offices all around the world, and building ties has been in our DNA since the beginning of our international trade. For those of you who may not know Quebec, maybe a brief summary. We're almost 9 million people now in Quebec, 20% of the country's GDP, a very diversified economy with incredible successful sectors like aerospace, agri-food, engineering companies, very diversified economy. but a small community of almost 9 million people. So we always have needed to trade and export to grow. Almost 27% of our labor force depends on export. And so it's always been a priority. Thus, our big network of offices abroad, whose primary focus is really trade, but with a strong objective of also maintaining and nurturing ties with the Francophone community. We're happy to be in Toronto. I might add that Toronto has the biggest Francophone community outside of Quebec in Canada. So although we do trade in the language of our clients, so if it's in English, we trade in English, no problem. We also value building ties with the Francophone community in Canada and internationally. So Quebec, maybe a last fact that's important to mention today is that Quebec is a member of l'Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, a membre de plein droit. So the only province with that privilege, along with Canada as a whole, and in Toronto, I think the only other partner we have is France. So we've been with that organization since the 70s, and we have a lot of other formal links with the Francophone community. So it will be my pleasure to discuss that more during the panel today.
Merci beaucoup. Yann?
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Yann Plante. I'm the president and CEO of RDÉE Canada. The name is Réseau de développement économique et d'employabilité du Canada. So we are an organization that is really a network across the country. We have 13 offices. So one is the national office in Ottawa. And we have 12 members in every province and territory across the country. And we're devoted to work with French and Acadian community in minority situation all across the country. We basically have more than 250 experts on the ground providing services to these communities. We work on three main pillars, which is entrepreneurship, employability, and economic development. We are pretty involved with existing businesses or entrepreneurs who have a plan to launch a business. We also work with people who want to get a job and just have to work on their skills for employability. 75% of our clients in that sector are immigrants. So we work a lot as well to recruit international talent. And we also work, economic development, as you can imagine. It's about everything is economic development. So I'm pleased to be here today and have a conversation with you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Thank you, panel. While you prepare your questions for the panel, I'll leave you a few minutes to think about what you would like to ask. Je vais vous laisser quelques minutes pour réfléchir à ce que vous aimeriez poser comme question à notre panel. Mais Catherine, tu mentionnais un peu plus tôt qu'il y a des secteurs spécifiques économiques au Québec d'importance, l'aérospatiale, agri-food, etc. There's special economic sector that you were alluding to in your introduction about aerospace, agri-food, etc. I'd like to ask you, all four of you, are there specific economic sectors that should be prioritized when we look at seizing the international Francophone market? Maybe I could start with you, Catherine.
Well, as I said, the Quebec economy is very diversified, so I wouldn't focus on one sector. But we're talking today about the Francophone world. And one thing I would say is that in the last few decades, Canada as well as Quebec, we focus on a lot of different markets, markets such as China, for example, and India. Quebec has many offices in China. We opened an office in India in 2008. And when we look at what's happening to the world today, we notice that things can change quickly. And so we really need to diversify our market. Also, Canada, like Quebec, we're heavily invested in the American market. Quebec exports 73%, I think, of all its export to the US. So we're not a very diversified economy as far as export market. So for us, one of the obstacle that we see is the fact that we need to create more ties with other high growth markets. And Africa, and French Africa particularly, is truly, we believe, the market of tomorrow. And one of the problem is we hadn't developed that market. So it's a bit of a lack of knowledge, a lack of presence in those markets. And over the last few years, Quebec has opened our last 3 offices have been in Northern Africa. So now we have an office in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Morocco. And we really believe that with more ties to the African continent, we'll be able to expand the growth of our trade with those Francophone market. And when we look at Africa as a whole, who's heavily invested in Africa? A lot of Chinese people and other Russian. So international markets are already there and they see the potential. And I think for Canada as well as for Quebec, the goal is really to do more. And that really touches for all kinds of sector. If we look at Africa, obviously mining, engineering are all very strong sectors, but it could really expand to all kinds of different area. It could be even cultural sectors. So the sky's the limit. There's a lot of untapped potential in this market for us.
Merci beaucoup. Gaëtan, do you want to contribute?
Well, I think that I'll piggyback on Catherine. The market, the African market. Now I'm going on my 3rd trip in about a month to Africa, and it's unbelievable. And the respect that we have on that country, we're more highly viewed than, let's say, the Russians, the Chinese, even the Europeans. And one of the reasons is Canada's strength is multiculturalism. But it started with bilingualism, and then it became a multicultural country. And in New Brunswick, we have seen the benefits because everybody's fighting for resources, human resources, and they're doubling their population every 25 years. Average of 4.4 kids still in Africa, and so it's growing so fast. I was in a country where it's the size of New Brunswick, and we have 800,000 people. They have 8 million people in a smaller size than New Brunswick. So imagine all the people that we can have access to. 21 countries, Carl, you said, that have French as the official language. And now we even have the Anglophones, the business traditional Anglophones say, I want these Africans too. They're going to learn English in no time in Canada because the system allows Canadians to become bilingual very rapidly. So that's the strength. That's the strength that the US doesn't have. That's the strength that people that don't have 2 official language don't have. So I think it's our ace up the sleeve.
Merci beaucoup. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just jump on what Gaëtan said, because if we want to acknowledge that there's a lot of value added to the French and Francophone economy in this country, or bilingual economy, there was a study that was co-written by our former board of director chair. His name is Pierre-Marcel Desjardins, and the other signatory's last name is Campbell. But the name of the study is Deux langues, c'est bon pour les affaires. So 2 languages is good for business. I invite everybody to read this study. But basically, they identify 6 economic benefits to bilingualism in this country. First, it attracts business. And I'll give you an example in a few minutes. It helps as well to develop some business sectors, such as engineering, such as IT, such as telecom, such as language industries. It also helps for exportation. It also helps to attract tourism. It also helps to attract international students. We should not forget about that. And it also helps to attract immigrants. And let me just give you an example of mutual benefits that it is in this study. So there's a global company who opened a customer service calling center in New Brunswick. And so when you're calling the customer service and they say, for service in French, press 1, and for service in English, press 2. So that means there are a certain number of people who can speak French in the company. But the study saw that 31%, I believe, of the employees were Francophone that could speak English, and 66% were unilingual Anglophones. So you can see that the creation of a bilingual job also helped creating unilingual Anglophone jobs as well. So there was a mutual benefit. I really like this story because it shows that, you know, there's something in it for everyone, and there's mutual benefits.
Merci beaucoup. Charles?
Well, very interesting things have been said. To your initial question to Catherine, I think it's more a question of developing new markets than focusing on certain sectors of activity. CETA is a good example. So the agreement with the European Union, the Federation, we're going to Brussels and Paris next week to discuss actually the fact that we're sub-using this agreement from a Quebec and Canadian perspective, whereas we were the first to really want it to be signed. And now the French and the Belgians are using this agreement way more than the other way around. So we want to discuss that, and we think that given the fact that we speak French is an interesting, segue to have those discussions. As Gaëtan was mentioning, the French language from an international perspective is booming. And I don't think that we realize that as Canadians, because when we talk about the French language in Canada, it's always a little bit, I wouldn't say negative, but from a protective or defensive standpoint, rightfully so in many ways. But when we look at what's happening in the world, we're going to grow from 350 million speakers to close to 800 million in 50 years from now. That's an interesting market, 800 million people. And we're trying to put that into perspective in Quebec, because in Quebec we have two official hobbies, hockey and talking about the French situation. And we need to talk about it in a way more positive way, and we need to talk about it not among ourselves, but with other people, so with other fellow Canadians, but also with maybe some Americans as well. So just an example, it was kind of a stunt. I mean, it's not a revolution, but we went to Harvard University last April to give a conference on the French opportunity in Canada and the way that bilingual companies in Canada could be interesting partners for Americans that want to go into those French-speaking markets. Of course, the Americans do not need us from the get-go, but we could be an interesting duet if we want to get into those new markets, like in Africa, for example.
So you're talking about opportunities and about the Canadian advantage. It sounds like we're very well positioned in terms of structures of our businesses and opportunities to have access to, students coming out of our post-secondary institutions, international students, immigration and professional coming to Canada to work with us. So our workforce is diversified. We have access to 2 languages. It sounds like it would be easy, but it looks like it's not. We're underutilized. So what are the obstacles that we're facing to taking full advantage of the economic edge, and what can we do to overcome them?
Well, maybe I can name a few. We have to be honest with each other. We have some barriers to unlock. Just thinking of the recognition of skills and diplomas. One thing I hear as well when I'm touring the country from my members and from people I see is that in some local regions, the programs that are available in the universities are not necessarily aligned with the local labor needs, so that we bring some international students, but they will leave for Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal because the program in which they study is not really aligned with the labor needs. I can give you as well an example that I just heard in a province a few weeks ago. So there's this master electrician who's coming from Africa, and he's coming with his wife and 4 kids. And the regulatory body who's responsible to determine, if you are skilled enough to do a profession, won't even accept that this guy do a test to measure his level of skills. They force him to be an apprentice electrician. So he's going to earn $28,000. He has to feed a family of 5. what's the percentage of risk that he's gone by a year from now when he realizes it's going to be impossible? So how is that possible? I mean, that we don't even let this person do a test to measure his real level according to our standards, and then enter the labor market. So that's just a few examples, but we have to be honest. There's a lot of things we need to unlock to make it possible to keep, not only attract these people, but to do the retention of them as well.
Merci beaucoup. D'autres membres du panel qui aimeraient intervenir? Gaëtan?
Really, too many people that immigrates to Canada, unfortunately. Being in Toronto over 100 times, I took a lot of taxi, and a lot of them were much more educated than I am, and that's the only job they got. I think that's a risk that we have doctors, engineers, professionals that are actually as strong as our workers in Canada that cannot find a job because of what Jan talked about. Very personal experience. I had a health situation last year, and could have been on dialysis. A South African agreed to operate me after hours. And I mean, we had to twist arms to do that. And he said, it's sad that you have so many issues in Canada in the competencies of skills. I mean, that guy was a professional. He had done, in South Africa, they were doing the types of operation like 10 a day. In New Brunswick, we do 1 or 2 a day. So they have really mastered how to do it. They made him work 2 years to get his degree back, the equivalencies, giving a social insurance number, all these things that, I mean, we need these people. Let's fast track them and save more people. So we need to be quicker. And that's both federal and provincial. And I think that we have to, as organizations, as business people, we want to attract these people. They cannot be driving taxis. And when you have brilliant doctors, you got to let them save Canadian lives.
Merci. Catherine?
Yeah, well, one obstacle that might seem obvious, but if we want to really tap into the potential of the French markets internationally is to have more French speakers in Canada. So although Quebec, we are a French province, I've been in Toronto for more than 7 years now, and I realized that a lot of people want to learn French. And Ontario has a great network of schools that teach French, but also advanced French in different English schools. And those are very, very popular programs. So although there is bickering over French in Canada, what you see when I meet parents and families, they want their kids to learn French. And even I was speaking to an immigrant family in Alberta, and they wanted their kids to go to the French immersion schools because they're like, of course, like learning another language is going to help my kid. If I want my kid to be the best, they need to know, English, French. The more language, and French is accessible in English, but we don't have enough teachers. And la pénurie d'enseignants est généralisée au Canada, des enseignants de français, que ça soit à Vancouver, Calgary, Halifax, Ontario, and that's something I think Canada could focus on, and just making sure that everybody who wants to learn French can learn French, because I think it's well accepted that it's going to be good for the country, for the people. And I know in Quebec, we've just launched Francisation Québec, so helping nouveaux arrivants, immigrant population that come to have access to French classes and be able to master the language. Obviously, Quebec is a bit different. You need French to really progress. But I would say that since I'm here in Toronto, this cry for more French classes all across our school system in Canada is definitely there. And the more immigrants from African countries we have, the more French speakers we have in Canada, the more we'll be able to create those ties with those countries and then do commerce, because obviously the diaspora of those countries helps do business. As I said, Quebec we're also the most bilingual province in Canada. So when we do business in the US and elsewhere, we adapt to our clientele. We do speak English, but obviously, when you share a language, a culture when you're able to communicate, business is all about relationship building. And so this gives us an easy access to a easy tie, a easy way in, a better way to build trust with people of those countries. And so I think to invest more, obviously, in having more francophones in Canada would definitely be good for not only Quebec, but Canada as a whole and trade in general.
Merci beaucoup. Charles?
Well, rapidly, Catherine is right about the shortage of teachers. That's kind of a bad curse right now that we need to work on that. Interesting that Catherine is also speaking about the creation of Francisation Québec. So maybe some people know about that in the past few months in Quebec. Of course, we want to protect that language of ours, and it's very important. But at the same time, let it be known that the business community in Quebec is really checking on the government to make sure that defending French does not mean not promoting bilingualism, trilingualism. So there's kind of an argument right now between the government and associations like us, because we want to make sure that we're not missing great opportunities, great talents throughout the world because of that reality of ours in Quebec.
Merci. Obviously, strategic thinking around resources is always very important. And, when you have different interests around the same table, having open conversation and being able to bring everybody together, I think always makes business grow better. Now, in a few seconds, I would like to talk about opportunities. Charles was mentioning earlier that we are underutilized. I would like to see how we can be overutilized and maybe share some stories about who succeeded seizing that international Canadian Francophone market. But before I do that, I would like to turn to the room and see if I can see some hands. If anybody have a question that I would like to ask the panel, you're all business people here. You may have some interest in either sharing your stories or contributing to the conversation. All right, so I'll turn back to the panel. Merci beaucoup. Alors, on a parlé tout à l'heure de l'utilisation de nos compagnies, de notre potentiel et des outils qui sont à notre portée qu'on peut utiliser davantage. Alors, quels sont ces outils-là et comment on peut les saisir pour pouvoir vraiment capitaliser sur le marché international et les opportunités qui existent à l'heure actuelle? Je ne sais pas si un de vous, Yann?
Start. I think I would put the emphasis on the importance of networking. Catherine talked about building relationship, but that's very important. And you can do it through the French communities that are already here in Canada because they have relationship abroad as well, right? When we welcome a new Canadian that's coming from another country, they're coming with their own network abroad as well. And what we can realize when we're touring the country and we meet with French and Acadian communities, they are usually, very dynamic, very committed, and they have this collective spirit as well. And that can be helpful because if you are able to penetrate those communities and to do business with an example like a calling center, which is pretty simple, but then it can help a company to get through the supply chain of a global company, and then it can help as well to get more markets abroad. So yeah, I think the importance of networking is key, and that's an opportunity that we have because it's there. Like we can just do more connection and be present. And let's say you're here in this forum, that's great. You're probably going to leave this forum with a long list of business cards of people you didn't know before. Well, that's the same principle.
Merci beaucoup.
C'est justement ce que l'Alliance, la Francophonie économique canadienne veut faire. Puis, il y a beaucoup de relations bilatérales. Il y a beaucoup de relations, le Québec puis le Nouveau-Brunswick, ça date de longtemps. L'Ontario, le Québec, ça date de longtemps. What we're missing, though, is multiple networking. And we have a lot of minority situation. We have a very strong giant of Francophonie in Quebec, renowned worldwide in 54 offices, which is amazing. 34, sorry. It'll be 50, going on 54th, Catherine. But what we want to do is benefit from that network. They're already established. And sometimes we, in the minority situation, tend to work in isolation or with partners that we trust one-on-one. But the Alliance will connect all the chambers of commerce in Quebec from New Brunswick. And we intend to become the francophone and bilingual business voice of the country. There's really no association. Great respect for my friend Goldie at the Business Council of Canada. They do documents in both language, but when there's a francophone, you look at their board of directors, there's not a lot of understanding of that strength. And I want to build quickly on Yan's example. You know, suddenly you have a call center, and Frank McKenna was a champion, and he understood that power. He learned French, by the way, when he became premier, and he saw the opportunity, but he saw this ripple impact. And so suddenly you have Purelator for North America taking calls in French and English, and Yan explained that 70% of the job were for unilingual. So the English communities were actually benefit from these additional thousands of jobs that were created by bilingual call center. But suddenly they realized, well, we need IT, because a call center has a lot of IT calls. You need technical people. And now you have workers that speak French only, and suddenly Quebec has, so now they choose an IT support center in New Brunswick. And now they become like technologists, technician, and then you need a communication network. So NBTEL became a giant in New Brunswick. We had the highest penetration of internet in North America, a small province of New Brunswick, just because we had bilingualism. And finally, on the report from Campbell and Desjardins, they explained that people that have multiple languages tends to do better. They get higher positions, they make more money. And look at Europe, they have 3 or 4 languages. I met many Quebecers that speak 4 languages. I feel embarrassed to only know 2. Bit of German, but it's so poor. And what it does, it creates this tolerance. Canada is a tolerant country because we are adopting and practicing multiculturalism. Le multiculturalisme, c'est notre force au Canada.
Tout à fait. Puis, un des points de l'Alliance, c'est d'aider justement la connaissance des autres réalités d'affaires au Canada. Donc, évidemment, on connaît très bien l'Ontario au Québec, mais très peu d'entreprises au Québec connaissent la réalité d'affaires en Alberta. Quand on entend parler de l'Alberta au Québec, c'est souvent plus sur des questions de ressources naturelles ou des questions politiques, mais rarement sur des questions entrepreneuriales. Alors, la collaboration avec le Conseil de développement économique de l'Alberta, par exemple, vise justement à faire en sorte que des petites entreprises, parce que les grandes ont souvent du staff, ont des gens pour créer ce genre d'opportunités-là, alors que les PME n'ont pas cette opportunité-là. Alors, de la rencontre va naître des contacts puis un réseau d'affaires. Ça fait des millénaires que le commerce se passe justement par la rencontre de gens puis le développement de réseaux. Alors, aussi bien le faire ici aussi.
Merci beaucoup.
Oui, puis j'aimerais saluer toute l'énergie et le dynamisme de la Fédération des chambres de commerce du Québec dans son implication dans l'Alliance, justement, parce que je pense que c'est très important. C'est vrai qu'au Québec, on travaille fort à reconnaître les communautés francophones de partout au Canada. Depuis 95 maintenant, on a des politiques du Québec en matière de francophonie canadienne. And Quebec really wants to build more ties with Francophones inside of Canada because there's a multitude of communities. They're all very different. We've had an office in Moncton to create ties with the Acadian community for 40 years now, but there's Francophone communities in Yukon and Vancouver, Sudbury, everywhere. So that's really important. Quebec also invests, I think it's about $2.3 million every year for about, in average, I think we help 275 projects that link Francophone communities outside of Quebec with community organization in Quebec. So how can we break this two solitudes that the concept that's well known of Quebec being a bit isolated, and how can we build ties and really foster the strength that comes with numbers and with having connections. So that's something we're very committed to doing. We just launched our new, last year, our new politique du Québec en matière de francophonie canadienne. We've invested even more money. And maybe I'd like to end with a concrete example. For a year now, we've been developing a network of en français, c'est le réseau francophone des diplômés québécois. So a network of graduates from Quebec universities. And because it stems from money we have to help foster this link with the Francophonie all across Canada, all our events are in French. And one of my big surprises is that when Francophones, let's say from Quebec, or Anglophones who've lived in Quebec and go outside of Quebec, we very easily speak English. So that's a bit our fault. Sometimes we should be maybe more proud of speaking French and dare to speak French, because a lot of people speak French in Canada and sometimes we just don't know. So these events, we've done about 10 events over the last year. We've reached 600 people and they're all in French, and people really are looking for opportunities to mingle and network in French. And we have people from all Quebec universities, including English universities, such as McGill is one of our biggest participants. And it's Francophiles, people who want to have this opportunity, whether in Calgary, Vancouver, here in Toronto, to network in French and practice their French. So I think this idea of also being proud of having this value, added value of having a large segment of our population that speaks French and to promote it is really important. And maybe a last example is, for a couple of years now, we've been partnering with Ontario to give a prize for companies who from Ontario and Quebec, and we have another prize for also in innovation for Quebec companies in Quebec and New Brunswick that do business in French. And la FCCQ is one of our partners in that, la FGA également. And this is a way to showcase the beautiful companies that are invested in promoting French, that are not shy to do so, that are proud to do so, and who are successful. So really putting the spotlight and celebrating that aspect of what makes Canada different is a big part of what we're doing right now. And more, and a lot of provinces really are really cognizant of the importance of their French community. And so I think the future looks good. I think we could do more, but it's going in the right direction.
Shall we?
Another example of what we're doing with the government of Quebec is we're organizing French sessions or workshops on the business topics in actual English-speaking conferences or events throughout Canada. So we were in Halifax a couple of months ago with the Smart Energy event. We went to Timmins for a mining expo. We're going to Calgary next week for the Electricity Transformation Canada. So we're hosting those sessions in French. And most of the time, honestly, it's filled with English-speaking people that are, I hope, curious to hear about the current issues, but from a French-speaking perspective.
It's a good concept. Being Franco-curious is also a skill that you can develop. But I'm hearing a lot about promotion, education, and when we talk about international market and opportunities, do we have sufficient platform where we can educate people about the opportunities to do business with Canadian businesses or to even do business here? You talked about IOF earlier, and we talked about l'Alliance. So we have platform, we have tools to be able to reach or to support even businesses to reach internationally. What other tools do we have, and are we doing sufficient use of those tools to be able to grab the international francophone market from a Canadian standpoint? Donc, est-ce qu'on a suffisamment utilisé les outils qui nous permettent d'avoir accès aux marchés internationaux? On parlait de l'OIF tantôt, on parlait aussi de l'Alliance. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire davantage pour les utiliser et quels autres outils sont à notre portée pour pouvoir soutenir les entreprises canadiennes à faire des affaires à l'international puis continuer de prendre avantage de cette population croissante-là?
Personnellement, je pense que les organisations politiques comme l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie, c'est bien, mais c'est bien d'avoir des organisations sur le terrain qui sont justement représentants des entreprises, des entrepreneurs. Alors, la relation avec les chambres de commerce francophones à l'international, c'est un dossier qui est très important. Pour nous, c'est plus porteur, c'est plus tangible. Alors, on travaille, nous, on a signé une entente avec les CCI France, donc les chambres de commerce et d'industrie de France, la conférence des chambres de commerce africaines aussi, donc pour échanger des meilleures pratiques sur comment réussir la conquête de marchés francophones, mais aussi, à terme, d'échanger des employés aussi. Donc, de permettre à des gens d'ici d'aller vivre une expérience d'affaires en France ou en Afrique ou en Suisse ou en Belgique pour pouvoir revenir ici avec des nouveaux outils de développement.
Complètement d'accord avec Charles sur ce point-là. Dans le passé, on était perçu, quand on allait dans des tournées internationales, qu'on allait promouvoir la culture française. C'est un peu du tourisme. Mais maintenant, des missions économiques sont de plus en plus fréquentes. And that's what people want to see, because cultural tourism are really byproducts of a good business environment. So if you can create the three leg of the stool, if you bring the economic development, and organizations like the RDÉE are dedicated to that, and we're dedicated to connect all the Francophone and bilingual business, if we can integrate those three elements in every mission, then it doesn't cost a lot more and it's much more productive at the end. C'est plus productif d'avoir les trois ensemble que oublier le développement économique, puis après ça, il n'y a pas d'entente qui survient de ces rencontres-là.
Yann ou Catherine, voulez-vous contribuer?
Ben, c'est sûr qu'on peut en faire plus. Je pense qu'il y a un potentiel inexploité, ça c'est clair. And we're doing more and more. I mean, even the International Agency for Francophonie is very focused on economic development. So more and more trade missions are being organized. One is coming to Quebec next summer, I believe. Because during those trade missions, we also get to know different countries that are part of the mission. So it's trade between ourselves, going to a country. But we need to do more on all kinds of level. I'm also on the board of Logic, which is an organization that helps young people, 18 to 35 years old from Quebec, travel and gain different experience internationally as well as in Canada. And we're celebrating 55 years of doing so. I think we're the only organization of that type in Canada. And it started with a partnership with France and then continued with a partnership with Wallonie, the French part of Belgium. And now it's worldwide. It's all language, all countries. But for us, it started with this link with the Francophone community, and to be able to have Quebecers and in the case of France or Wallonie, French and Belgian people come to Quebec even at a young age. It's really the beginning of, those people will grow up and then have businesses and then have those international connections. So there's all kinds of things we can do at all kinds of level. And I mean, even thinking of Vue d'Afrique. So at the cultural level, we also need to understand different cultures better. So for over 40 years now, I think we have a film festival in Quebec that showcase Francophone cinema from Africa. And it's highly popular. People go and all those little gestes, all these little actions really help foster that sense of community. And then when the same people who've participated in youth exchange or attended a cultural event, they're better equipped than when they come to do business with other countries. So there's just like hundreds of things we could do to really get to the full potential of business with Francophone community, because it's also Francophone communities on all 5 continents. It's very diversified geographically wide. So when we talk about resilience and building resilience, I think to be able to diversify our market on 5 continents through this one channel is definitely an opportunity not to be missed. So.
Well, all great points. And maybe one thing I would add is local companies can also penetrate global markets through the supply chain of global companies that are already here. I've seen a company, it's called, I believe, LMS Rail in Earth, in Northern Ontario. They invented a product where they were taking a big Ford, I don't recall, it's E450 or whatever, and they made some changes on the truck so that it can serve railway companies and companies like Siemens Mobility, for instance, and that kind of thing. And I'm mentioning them because they are a client of them. But by doing that, then when a global company like Siemens is going to bid on procurement project across the world, then they may come and ask LMS to be part of their service provider. So, you know, all those missions, everything that is great, but sometimes a portion of the solution is already in your backyard when you can get into the supply chain of a global company that's already here.
So you're talking about example or success stories. You talked about NBTEL earlier. And I wanted to touch about those success stories as well to inspire people. I'm mindful of the time. We have 3 minutes to go through it, but I think to leave everyone on concrete example as well of what can be achieved. Do we have more of those success stories that come to mind that we can share with the public today?
Siemens came to New Brunswick from Germany. I was told by Quebec and Ontario they'll never come here, we're too small. Why did they come to New Brunswick? Because it was actually smaller. We are very well intertwined. The public utility, the energy control system, the university was all into one ecosystem. To do smart grid in Canada, we started in New Brunswick. My board thought I was wasting my time to try to court Siemens to come to New Brunswick. They chose us over Ontario and Quebec. Why? Because it was actually quite dynamic, but they also liked the fact that we had 2 languages. Bringing people in New Brunswick give access to most Canadians or international players that they got from Germany and Toronto because they had a main office in Toronto. And the parents are happy that their kids will be bilingual at the end of a bilingual province. So the more we can offer that service, and they also know that they can be higher in leadership, they can get better jobs in Ottawa. So it's an incredible opportunity. Europeans, they don't blink an eye with multi-languages. So I think Canadians, we can do that more and more and be greater for it.
So many examples. If we're talking about the companies from outside Canada coming in, Ubisoft would be a great example in Quebec, because when they came and set up shop for their game, it's in the gaming sector, it really helped Quebec build an ecosystem, and they're a French company. And although I wasn't part of the negotiation, you would assume that also being part of this Francophone space was a plus to be able to talk to headquarters while being present in North America, and now they're all over. They have a lot of different companies. But as far as Quebec companies, Toronto Global Forum could be a success story. It's originally from Quebec, have a hugely successful conference in Montreal, and then expanded in France, Toronto, the US, Latin America. Cirque du Soleil, it started from a small regional circus, street circus, and then because of the the duality of cultures in Quebec, is now an international company with I don't know how many countries are represented within the Cirque. And I think this ability to navigate between different cultures really helps create worldwide, world successful companies. Yes, and I know the time is running by, so.
And if we're on the radio, it would get cut. But fortunately for us, we're not. I do want to take a moment, though, to thank our panel. Gaëtan Thomas, chair président de l'Alliance de la Francophonie économique canadienne. Charles Milliard, président et chef de la direction. CEO Fédération des chambres de commerce du Québec. Catherine Tadros, Chief Representative Bureau du Québec à Toronto. Et Yann Plante, président et chef de la direction, CEO RDÉE Canada. Merci beaucoup.